Chapter 15. Who shows courage, encourages others. Adolf Kolping, German priest and social reformer. The following Wednesday, 2 letters came to our door. The first was from Oma Gertrude, my mother's mother, and the woman for whom I'd been named. For as far back as I could remember, Oma Gertrude had always been old, but over the last year she had begun to have some health problems. The state was usually very cooperative about giving my mother time off from work to take care of Oma's needs. But Mamma seemed worried this time. "She's fallen and broken her leg," Mamma said. "I'll have to stay with her for a while. Perhaps the state will give me work near her home." "What about us?" I asked. Our family was separated enough. I didn't want Mamma leaving too. "We can take care of ourselves," Fritz offered. "School is almost out for the summer, and I've got to stay here in Berlin and work. Gerda can take care of things around the house." "I'll come home as soon as I can." Then Mamma frowned, second-guessing herself. "You should both come with me." "No!" Fritz and I were in agreement about that. Aside from whatever work he could find, Fritz had a girlfriend here now, and I didn't want to stay with Oma. Her house smelled like fish, and there was nothing to do. So against my mother's better judgment, it was decided that we would stay in Berlin while she went to the countryside to help Oma Gertrude. None of us seemed particularly happy about the idea, but we all agreed it was our best option. The second letter was for Fritz. It was from the military, reminding him that he would turn 18 in June. By the end of that month, he would be expected to enroll for a year and a half of service. Refusing to serve, the letter clearly stated, would have serious consequences. Well, of course it would. Everything had serious consequences. Fritz's eyebrows pressed together as he read it, and I could tell that he was bothered. But even if he was, he clearly remembered, as we always did now, that the ears of the Stasi were hidden somewhere in our apartment, and so he couldn't say anything when he finished other than, "This is a great opportunity. I can hardly wait." Fritz wasn't as good a liar as I was, probably because he had a genuinely good heart, or a better heart than mine, anyway. His attempt to sound positive came out sounding sarcastic and brittle, so I countered by saying, "I know you're excited, but we'll miss you." It sounded believable, though my sympathetic expression to him said otherwise. He smiled a thanks in return. Mamma didn't appear to have noticed any difference in him, or any particular strangeness in the tone of his words. But neither of us blamed her for that. She looked more tired every day, and now the news from Oma needing care, and the reminder of Fritz's military duty, I was sure Mamma's mind was full of all the worries it could possibly hold. She left early to go into work and speak with her supervisor. Fritz said because of that we'd had some extra time, too, and I did want him to walk me to school. I should have refused his offer. After all, I was plenty old enough to get myself to school, but I missed walking with Anna, and it would give us a chance to talk in private. It was a busy morning, with the street full of Trabants, the bulky, inexpensive Eastern cars that were about as reliable as snow in July. The common joke said that the best feature of the Trabants was the heater in the back, which would warm your hands as you pushed it home. As we left the building, a white truck pulled up directly in front of our apartment. It looked like a delivery truck, but had no markings on it at all. That alone was odd. Our building rarely received deliveries. A door opened and a man was pushed out onto the street. He fell on his hands and knees, and the second I recognized our neighbor, I darted over to help him up. "Herr Kraus?" I glanced up only long enough to see Victor, Fritz's former friend, standing in the doorway of the truck. He frowned at me and then eyed Fritz. Neither of them said a word, and Victor's expression was so cold I thought maybe he had been turned to ice. Then he shut the door and the truck drove away. Herr Kraus had heavy bags under his eyes and his hands were shaking. "Are you all right?" I asked him. "Can we send for a doctor?" He put his hands on either side of my face and tears streamed down his cheeks. "I never should have printed those papers," he said. "Do you hear me? I was wrong." By then another woman in our apartment had seen Herr Kraus. She darted forward and used her shoulders to prop him up. Fritz held out a hand and said, "I can carry him in." "No!" The woman pushed his hand away as if he had offered poison rather than help. "It's better for everyone if you go to school." Her eyes darted around the street. "Please, just go." "It's getting worse," Fritz said, when we were alone. "People are more suspicious of us, and they keep their distance. Word is getting out that I was arrested." "Anna barely looks at me anymore." Then I shrugged. "School is out at the end of this week, so at least during the summer I won't have to watch her ignore me all day." Fritz stopped walking and shoved his hands in his pockets. "There's this girl I like." "Claudia." He smiled at first, hearing her name, but it quickly faded away. "Yeah, we've known each other for a long time but just started dating a few weeks ago. I like her a lot, actually, and even asked if she'd wait for me until I got my release from the military. She said she would, until last night. Her father doesn't want us dating anymore." "Why not?" Fritz kicked at the ground with his foot. "The Stasi showed him my file. They suggested it wouldn't be good for Claudia to continue dating me." "I'm sorry, Fritz." My sympathy wouldn't make him feel any better, I knew that, but I felt his hurt and frustration like it was my own. He only sucked in a whistle of air and then blew it out again. "Ever since I was arrested, a couple of months ago, I've tried, Gerda. Honestly, I have. I've tried to say the right things and do the right things and be whatever it is they want of me. But the more I try to do what they want, the more I understand that my life has been put on this track to failure. From now on, wherever I go, they will stand in my way. I can't win against them." "You can get Claudio back. I'm sure you can." "Maybe, but that's not why I told you." He smiled, but it was so sad and hopeless I'd rather have seen him frown. "The same thing is coming for you, too." Even though he spoke quietly, his words echoed like thunder in my ears. Watching Fritz was like looking at pictures of my own life 5 years down the road, when I would be 17 and hoping to get into a university, only to be rejected, needing to get a good job, or any job for that matter, only to be turned down, trying to find someone I could love, only to have him pulled away from me for reasons I would never fully understand. I knew it would all happen to me, because it was already happening to Fritz. "This all started when father participated in that uprising 12 years ago," Fritz said, and now his tone grew bitter. "He thought because he wasn't arrested that he got away with it, but he didn't, and then he spent every year since then talking to people about ideas that are considered dangerous here. He thought he got away with that too because they were only ideas, but look at where we are now." I started walking again and Fritz followed along at my side. "You and I have ideas too," I told him, "and I don't want to become like them." I stared up at him. "That's not me, Fritz, and I don't think it's you either." "No, it's not," he said. "In fact, never mind." "In fact what?" Fritz was avoiding my eyes now, so I moved in front of him, forcing him to look at me. "Tell me!" He opened his mouth, then clamped it shut and walked past me. A new worry sprouted in my chest as I hurried to catch up to him. Fritz had been keeping secrets from Mamma for years just to protect her, but something had changed. Now he had started keeping them from me as well. Your question for this chapter is: who was Fritz's girlfriend and what happened to their relationship? Also, Why does Fritz not want to join the Stasi? Chapter 16. Freedom Lies in Being Bold. Robert Frost, American poet. After school, I returned to the Welcome Building. Every minute since the last time I was here had nagged at me. I'd left too quickly before. My father wanted me in that air raid shelter, and today I intended to get down there. I didn't bring the shovel in from the alley, but I did have a flashlight that I had snuck into my bag and kept hidden throughout the day. I stood in the alley and kept an eye on guards in the nearest tower. The instant they turned their backs, I ran for the building, watching them the entire time. I didn't anticipate the irrigation ditch being full of water as it was. I almost made the jump across, but still landed in mud, which slowed my run afterward. I must have made it to the building before they saw me, or else sirens would be headed my way already. But it was still too close, and even running so fast would have looked suspicious. If I was going to be on this property, I could never be stupid like that again. From now on, I would approach from the side, in the shadow of the wall. After I reached the building, it was hard to squeeze between the pried up boards, drop onto the dirt floor, then push the boards shut. There were fresh tire tracks from Grenzers on patrol, and more could be laid before nightfall. I needed to hurry. I grabbed the flashlight from my bag and stuffed it into the waistband of my skirt and pulled open the heavy metal door to the air raid shelter. Then I laid on my stomach and angled the flashlight downward to get an idea of what might be inside. I didn't expect ghosts or monsters to leap out at me, but at the same time, I wasn't fully ruling out that possibility either. The ladder was covered in spider webs and felt damp to the touch, but I gritted my teeth in some effort to feel more courageous, brushed off what I could reach, and then climbed down. The room below was colder than I had expected, but then I realized that unlike some shelters, it wasn't surrounded in metal. This was really only a deep hole with a metal lid and some crates at the bottom that probably once held emergency supplies. There was a bench at the far end and a couple of pipes that seemed to carry in fresh air from somewhere outside. The building above me was still standing, mostly, so I wondered if this room had ever been used during a raid. Probably it had, even if the Allies bombed had never landed here. Papa had been around my age during the war, and described staying awake all night in the shelters, being too tired to stand but too nervous to sit. There he would wait with whatever group had gathered in the shelter, hearing the airplane engines coming and then the incredible explosions as the bombs found their targets. Most of the bombings happened late in the war, and Germany's eventual defeat was certain by then. However, the Führer, Adolf Hitler, wasn't ready to surrender and seemed content to let Germany be entirely destroyed for his stubbornness. By that time, the Allies didn't seem to care where their bombs fell. They blanketed Germany, and particularly Berlin, with destruction. My school teacher said that by the end of the war nearly all of East Germany had been completely destroyed. Mama said the reason for East Berliners didn't fight the wall was because so many citizens considered it God's punishment for Germany's crimes in the Second World War. Maybe that was so, but God didn't seem to punish the West equally. And besides, the war was the crime of my grandparents' generation. I didn't see why I should be forced to share in their penance. I was too busy with my own crime, anyway, that of standing in the air raid shelter. It quickly became obvious that there were no treasure in this room. If anything had ever been here, it was stolen away long ago. But Papa should have expected that. He wouldn't have sent me here for something that could so easily be taken. Besides, whatever was here, he wanted me to dig for it. The east side of the room was crowded with crates and the bench, and the dirt behind it was buffered with large rocks. So I wandered to the west side and pulled at the dirt, which crumbled in cakes in my hand. Maybe Papa had buried something inside the walls. It made sense. If the ground above me was so hard, Papa couldn't have dug here to bury anything, but he could have put something down here, just buried behind a thin wall of dirt. The wall. The Berlin Wall was to be nearly over my head right now. And I'd realized that even if Papa had wanted me to find something buried in this dirt, it was far too dangerous for me to dig, because every centimeter I clawed in there put me one step farther inside the death strip. If I went too far, if I went too far, I'd end up in the West. The truth crashed into me like I just tumbled through waves of the ocean. I had been wrong before. There was no treasure buried in the air raid shelter. No, the shelter itself was the treasure. Papa must have known about the shelter because maybe he had stood in this very room as a child. This was where Papa wanted me to start digging. He wanted me to tunnel into the West, to freedom, to him. Your question for this chapter is: what reason did Mama give for why the East Berliners didn't fight the building of the wall? And that goes back to the part where we talked about the penance of the East Berliners.